Hello everyone, I am Ultrasonic Rainboom, and today I'm going to do a review on the Amazing Digital Circus finale, and also how the hate and criticisms of the show in general are very similar to the hate of G5, and why hate for both shows are wrong. This episode was absolutely amazing, but if you want to see how amazing this episode really is, go watch it for yourself, and you'll see how good it is for yourself. This episode literally made me cry, and I almost never cry in movies. I was also surprised with how quiet the audience was. Most of the people were in their 20s, and I thought the crowd would be very interactive and loud throughout the entire thing, but almost everyone in the theater was very respectful and quiet throughout the entire movie, which was great to see. But anyways, to get into why this finale was so good, I need to get into some spoilers here. So if you don't want to get spoiled, skip to this timestamp here. Or if you just want to get to the part where I talk more about how this relates to My Little Pony, then you can skip to that timestamp now. This is your last chance to skip to the timestamp before you get spoiled. So now, let's get into the review. So the movie in theaters showed both episode 8 and 9, and after Kinga accidentally killed Kane, it then showed some of the main cast using their imagination powers that Kinga has taught them to fix a damaged circus. Jax then walks up to Pomni looking upset, as if he wants to talk to her about something, and then says, "Never mind," and walks away. A voice-over narration of Pomni says something like, "I wish I spoke to him back then sooner." This line is tragic because directly after this, we then cut to Jax already being abstracted after the fact, which then implies Pomni's feelings of guilt for not talking to Jax before he abstracted in order to prevent him from abstracting and basically dying. This cut to Jax being abstracted was very surprising, and I was honestly disappointed that there wasn't any build-up to this at all. But after I watched the whole episode, I better understood and appreciated why they did this, because Jax was given a very big build-up and send-off throughout the whole rest of the episode entirely. So they were saving the build-up for his departure for the rest of the episode instead of just leaving it there, which was actually kind of good. We actually began to see Jax starting to abstract in episode 6. We start to see him being less mean and more depressed throughout episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9. He cares about Pomni, but he's afraid to care about her if he loses her and feels grief again if she abstracts. We see this in episode 6 when he starts getting close to Pomni, but then he sees the doors of Ribbit and Cosmo and is reminded of how they died, and he doesn't want to feel attached to anyone in the circus, or he will feel more pain from grief when they abstract. So when Pomni hugs him, he immediately rejects it in fear of feeling grief again from caring too much about people in the circus. Jax puts on a mask to hide his real emotions. That is why he was closed off to Ribbit after he opened up to her about something personal in his life, because he wants to hide his emotions and hide his real feelings. We can see this clearly in a scene in episode 8 where Zubul says, "You are still one of us." And you can see how taken back and surprised he feels about that, like he knows he doesn't deserve it. And then he immediately pulls back and puts his mask back on and tries to act all tough and cool to hide what he is really feeling on the inside. Pomni then chases Jax, who is now abstracted, and she grabs a gun from the gun episode, which made everyone in the audience go crazy, expecting that she would get her revenge from that episode for not shooting him at the end. But then Pomni uses the gun to do something surprisingly different, and she destroys all the lights in the hallway to make it dark, which then makes Jax's abstracted form calm and not threatening anymore, which is something that she learned from the Manor episode where Kinga told Pomni how darkness made his abstracted wife calm and less threatening. Pomni then enters Jax's mind, and we see a lot of flashbacks from Jax's life. We saw his relationship with Ribbit and Cosmo, and we saw how Jax became so mean. He actually used to be a decent and nice guy and a good friend, which was really cool and surprising to see. And he also fell in love with Ribbit, but once he opened too much to Ribbit about his past, he then became closed off to her and to everyone else, and he started to become more of a jerk in fear of opening up too much to people and caring too much about people, which resulted in Ribbit and Cosmo abstracting eventually, which he probably blames himself for, which is most likely why he doesn't care about people in the circus, in fear of losing them too. Seeing Pomni going into his mind and comforting him was amazing and very heartwarming to see. and Jax was crying and said, "I know I'm a terrible person, so then why does anybody still care about me?" Then Pomni hugs him as he is crying, which made me so emotional. This scene was amazing, and also showed great character development for Pomni. At the beginning of the show, she was too scared to face Kaufmo, who was abstracted. She was too scared to be put in danger, and when her hand became glitched, she was even too scared to help Agatha and abandoned her in fear of being hurt or glitched out. But in this episode, she was completely willing to sacrifice herself to get glitched in order to comfort Jax, even though he didn't deserve it and he was already basically dead, which made me so emotional and made me cry a few times. And the scene that she faces Jax's abstracted form takes place in the same hallway where she originally was too scared to face someone else who was abstracted, which shows great character development from Pomni. This scene also shows Agatha touching Pomni with her hand, being willing to let her hand be glitched out to comfort her, which is a direct parallel from episode 1 when Pomni's hand got glitched out when she tried to help Agatha. And then Kane returned. Somehow, Kane has returned, which surprised everyone in the crowd, and we all gasped at once. But seeing Kane actually take accountability for his actions and begin to change and try to empathize with the main cast more was an amazing change. It felt like he actually became on the same level as the main characters as one of their friends, and he became part of the main cast in the end and actually hung out with them and became friends with them. And I'm honestly glad that Kane returned, because the change of his character was amazing, and when he showed everyone their real names and their real lives in the real world, it was a very beautiful scene and very touching, and showed how Kane was empathizing with them more as humans. And the main cast accepting the fact that they were brain scans copies of themselves and not the original versions of themselves was a good way to end the series. The main cast accepting the fact that there was no way to leave the circus was hard at first. But I like what Pomni said at the end about her real self, when she said, "Abigail is living her best life right now, but here I am, just Pomni." And I also like how Kane calls Pomni by Abigail in this scene, by her real name, which then shows how Kane is trying to empathize with them as real humans. But then Pomni chooses to stick to her digital name, showing how she's accepted her fate in her life in the circus, which is a big character development from how she was at the beginning of the show, where she only wanted to escape the circus at all costs. I also generally just love the Looney Tunes parody in this episode as well. It's just so fun. The background music in this episode was also very amazing. I usually don't pay a lot of attention to the background music in other episodes in this series, but every single music track in this episode fit the scene and vibe perfectly well. Maybe it was just because I was watching this in theaters in a big screen where everything is much louder, so the music is a lot more noticeable in theaters, but the background music in this episode was the best it ever sounded in any other episode. As someone who creates music myself, I appreciate when the soundtrack really stands out in a film or show, and I just want to say thank you to the music team for doing such a fantastic job. Everything about this episode was amazing. The animation was very detailed and beautiful on a big screen. It was so good that immediately after the episode was finished, even before I walked out of the theater, I immediately grabbed my phone and bought another ticket online to see it again. Because this was too good to only see once in theaters, I have to see it twice. I don't have a choice. Seeing this YouTube series on the big screen in theater felt surreal and was really life-changing. This was honestly one of the best theater experiences of my entire life, right behind watching Avengers Endgame and Infinity War in theaters. And after the movie ended, I just sat in my car and sat there for a few minutes, just thinking about everything, because my mind was processing everything in utter amazement of how amazing it was. And I didn't see this movie once in theaters, not twice, but 3 times. It was so amazing that I had to see it 3 times. Episodes 8 and 9 are definitely the best the show's ever been. When I first started watching the show, after seeing episode 1, my reaction initially was, it's alright, but it isn't one of my favorite things I've seen before. But every episode after that only got better and better from there, and over time, I started to like the show a lot more. And after this amazing finale, I've officially become a big fan of this show, and this finale makes Digital Circus one of the best animated shows of all time, and easily one of my favorites. this episode was amazing. However, a lot of people have seen this episode and still call it bad. And I'm just sitting there like, what? How? Did you even watch it? What did you even watch? Did you watch something else? How could you call it bad? That's straight up impossible. And if you look at the Digital Circus fan base in general, the show has gotten a lot of hate in past episodes before. But why does the show get so much hate? Well, it's not because the show is actually bad. It's not. But it's only because people have their own expectations for the show and how they want it to be. And when the show doesn't fulfill those expectations people put in the show, then people call it bad because it didn't do what they wanted it to do. Episode 7 is a perfect example of dodging people's expectations. In that episode, the main cast were finally finding a way to get out of the circus to go back into the real world, which is what they've been building up to since the start of the show. But just as they were about to get back to the real world, it was revealed that the entire episode was all fake adventure created by Kane. Before the episode came out, Gooseworks said that episode 7 would annoy the right kinds of people. The people that give unfair criticisms and hate to the series. And I think it did its job well. People hate the show because it didn't fulfill their expectations. But just because it didn't do what you wanted to do, doesn't mean what it did do is bad. Because the story it tells is good, and you can't just ignore that. Gooseworks doesn't deserve the hate he gets. He didn't create a show to fulfill your expectations, but to tell a story. People get mad at the writers and say things like, why didn't it focus more on Bagatha or Zubul? But just because the show didn't do what you wanted to do, doesn't mean it's bad. This really isn't a spoiler for the episode, since it is highly emphasized in the official poster for the show. But this finale had a lot of focus on Jax. And I've heard a lot of people say things like, we got a lot of focus on Jax in this episode, but hardly any focus on anyone else. And they call this episode bad. Why? Just because it didn't focus on their favorite characters. But just because episode 9 didn't confirm your headcanons, or fulfill your fanfictions, doesn't mean the episode is bad. My expectations for the finale wasn't fulfilled either. I thought that Jax would become the villain at the end and play into his archetype. And I thought that the main cast would use their powers of imagination to find a way to escape the circus, but then choose ultimately to stay in the circus. But that didn't exactly happen. But just because my expectations weren't fulfilled, doesn't mean that what they did was bad. I am glad that my predictions didn't come true, because what the finale did was good. This hate of Digital Circus is also very similar to the hate from the Stranger Things finale. Sure, there might have been a few plot holes, like the government not arresting the main characters, and there might have been too many fake-out deaths. But still, the finale of Stranger Things was very good in general, and just because it didn't do what you expected it to do, doesn't mean it's bad. This is also the same thing with the finale of G4. The series finale of G4 was amazing, but some people hate it. There's even someone on the fandom on Twitter known as Save MLP who is completely against the finale of the show and against season 9 in general, and thinks that the show needs to be revised and redo season 9. This person calls the finale of the show trash, and that it deserves a better ending. But who is he to assume that his opinion of the finale is right and everyone else's opinion of the finale is wrong? Save MLP thinks that Hasbro needs to completely change and erase the ending of the show to do it all over again better, because apparently his vision of the show of G4 is the correct ending. But who are you to say that your own personal expectation for how G4 should have ended is the right one? So many people have many different expectations for how they want G4 to end. Even if Hasbro changed the ending of G4 to match Save MLP's vision, there would still be many people with different expectations for the show, and who would be disappointed because they had different expectations than what this guy had. If Hasbro changed the ending of G4 to match the vision of Save MLP, people with different expectations for the ending of the show that are different than Save MLP's expectations would still be disappointed and hate on Save MLP's vision of the show and call it trash and say that it has wasted potential. No matter what you do, there will always be someone with a different expectation and vision than what the show did, and there will always be people who hate on the ending of a show. That's something you can't avoid. It will always happen. Not because the show is bad, but because people have the wrong expectations. People hating in the ending of the show is unavoidable. It is always going to happen no matter what. Even if the ending of the show is a cinematic masterpiece, there will always be people who hate on it. Everyone has different expectations for how they want a show to go, and it is 100% impossible to please absolutely everybody, because there will always be people who want it to be different. But just because something is different, or not what you expected, doesn't mean it's bad. Just because the finale of G4 didn't go the way you wanted to go, doesn't mean it's bad. This is the exact same reason why most of the hate on G5 is wrong as well. A lot of people hate Make Your Mark and call it a bad show. But why do they call it a bad show? Because they make up in their mind their own vision for how they want to Make Your Mark to go. And because the show didn't follow their own vision or their own expectations for the show, they then call it bad. But the writers of Make Your Mark can't read your mind. The G5 writers don't have magic powers. Everyone is going to have different expectations of how they want a show to go. But just because Make Your Mark didn't read your mind and do what you wanted to do, doesn't mean what it did do is bad. People say that Make Your Mark in G5 has quote-unquote wasted potential. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so tired of hearing this. And why do people say it has wasted potential? Because they made up in their minds of how they want the show to go. And they have decided that in order for Make Your Mark to be good, it has to do exactly what they wanted to do. And because the writers didn't read their minds and do what they specifically wanted it to do, they then say G5 has wasted potential because it didn't do what they wanted. But it doesn't have wasted potential at all. Just because it didn't do what you wanted to do doesn't mean what it did do was bad. People are so focused on the fact that it didn't do what they wanted, yet they ignore all the deep writing in the main 5, in Misty's character arc, and in the tragic story of Allura, just because they want to justify their hate. If we make up our own expectations for a show, and then get mad at the show for not following our own made-up expectations, it isn't the show's fault, but it's our own fault for having the wrong expectations. You can't blame the show for this. You have no one else to blame but yourself. Even if Make Your Mark did read your mind and fulfill all of your expectations for the show, there will still be many people with different expectations than yours who will be disappointed and hate on your expectations for the show because it's not the same as their vision and their expectations. Who are you to say that your own personal expectations for the show of Make Your Mark is the right one when the expectations of the writers and many other people are wrong? What gives the Save MLP guy the right to say that his own personal expectations for the ending of G4 is the right one when the writer's expectations for the ending of G4 is wrong? When people hate on Make Your Mark and on G5 as a whole, just because the show didn't fulfill their own personal expectations, or say that G5 has wasted potential just because it didn't do what they wanted to do, they're being no different than the Save MLP guy. If you say that Make Your Mark has wasted potential just because it didn't do what you wanted to do, you are no different than the Save MLP guy. You are one and the same. You are putting your own personal expectations on the show, assuming that your own vision and your own expectations for the show are right, and everyone else's and the writer's expectations of the show are wrong. And you are assuming that if the show doesn't read your mind and do exactly what you wanted to do, then it is bad. But just because a show didn't do what you wanted or expected doesn't mean it's bad. As Hawk Nightwing said in his video series in Defending G5, Make Your Mark wasn't made to fulfill your expectations, but to tell a story, and the story Make Your Mark tells is good, and you can't ignore that to justify your hate, and you can't ignore the depth in G5's writing just because it didn't do what you wanted it to do. You can't ignore the amazing story G5 tells to justify your hate. Some people say Make Your Mark is bad because it didn't focus on explaining all of our questions on the lore of G4 and what happens during the gap of G4 and G5. But Make Your Mark wasn't made to just be about lore and to explain lore from G4. It wasn't made to focus on G4, but to tell a story, its own story in G5. And G4 wasn't all about lore either. Well, it did talk about lore in some episodes, as G5 talked about lore as well, most of the episodes from G4 didn't focus on lore at all, but just focused on telling a really good story. The same is true of G5. G5 does talk about lore sometimes, but that is not its focus, because Make Your Mark is not all about explaining lore and focusing on G4, but it's about telling its own story and focusing on its own generation with new characters. And the story it tells is good. So if you're going to hate on G5 for not focusing too much on the lore, then you also have to hate on G4 as well for doing the exact same thing, because over 90% of G4 wasn't about explaining lore at all, but only about telling a good story, the same thing as Make Your Mark did, and the story they tell is good. There are people who hate on Make Your Mark because it doesn't focus enough on explaining the lore of G4. But then, those same people also hate on Make Your Mark for focusing too much on G4? You hate on G5 for not focusing on G4, but you also hate on it for focusing on G4? Like, make up your minds! There was no possible way to please those people. Going back to the Digital Circus finale, this is all why the hate for the show itself is wrong as well. People put their own personal expectations for the show of how they want it to go. And just because the show didn't recreate their own fanfictions or fulfill their headcanons, or focus on their favorite characters, they then call the show bad. But just because the show didn't do what you expected it to do or wanted to do, it doesn't mean what it did do is bad. Gooseworks didn't make a show to fulfill your own expectations, but to tell a story. And the story it tells is good, and you can't ignore that. Fans of the show are way too entitled, and when their vision of the show isn't played out, when their headcanons aren't created, then they hate on the creator and call the show bad. And it even got to the point where fans started sending death threats to Gooseworks and to his friends over a fictional show. The Digital Circus fanbase has been known to be one of the most toxic fanbases online, because everyone is way too entitled to their own opinion of the show, and they hate on the creator of the show for following their own vision. People are way too entitled to their own headcanons, and wanted the show to focus on their favorite characters more. But the show focused more on Pomni and Jax, because they are the main characters. People say the show has wasted potential just because it didn't do what they wanted it to do. When the show made an episode focused on Kinger, Jax fans got mad for not giving enough attention to Jax, the favorite character. When they made an episode focused on Gangle, Megathar fans got mad because it didn't focus on the favorite character. No matter what the show did, fans always got mad that didn't have enough screen time or enough lines to their favorite characters. And then they say the show has wasted potential just because the writers had their own vision for it. People are too entitled these days and can't get over the fact that maybe the writers have their own vision of the show that is different than their vision, and that's okay. No matter what the show does, people in the fandom are always unhappy and keep on saying that the characters are underdeveloped. And why do people call these characters underdeveloped? Because they say that the other characters didn't get enough screen time, even though the other characters literally had whole episodes about them. These characters are not underdeveloped just because you want more screen time with them. They got a lot of attention already. But Jax and Pomni are the main characters, and that's okay. One thing that Gooseworks has said is how surprised he is that he got so much hate for making Jax and Pomni the main characters.
Going into this series, I never expected one of the things that people would get mad at me for would be making the show focus on the two main characters. I was like, oh, I didn't even know you could get mad about that. It's like building up the show to be about Pomni and Jax. It's like, oh, people are actually really upset about that. I'm sorry.
Fans get mad that Jax and Pomni are the two main characters of the show. But there was nothing wrong with having the main characters being main characters. The Toy Story movies focus on Woody and Buzz most of the time, with not a whole lot of development for their characters and the toys. But does that mean that you should bring hate to Pixar and send Pixar death threats because Rex wasn't given enough lines? No! Toy Story focuses on Woody and Buzz the most because they are the main characters. But does that mean that we should say that Toy Story has wasted potential and call the series trash because Mr. Potato Head and Slinky weren't given enough development? No! The character development of Woody and Buzz is amazing, and you can't just ignore that. Buzz and Woody are the main characters. So it makes sense to make the main characters, the main characters? Even though Toy Story 5 focused more on Jessie this time, Buzz and Woody are still the main characters and are focused on the most throughout the entire series, and that is not a bad thing. And it is 100% not right to throw literal death threats to a show's creator because you are way too stubborn and entitled to your own opinion of the show, and that you're way too upset about not having favorite characters have more screen time. That's 100% wrong, no matter what. So it is not at all fair to say that Digital Circus has wasted potential and to call the series trash just because it made the main characters the main characters. G5 doesn't have any wasted potential either. Just because it didn't do what you expected or wanted it to do doesn't mean what it did do was bad. I also think that hate and drama for the release of episode 9 was completely unfair and wrong. People were mad when the finale was coming to theaters early because there will be spoilers online. Well, newsflash, that is the same thing for literally every movie that's ever came out in theaters, ever. Not everyone goes to see a movie in theater right when it comes out. There are always spoilers online for every single movie that comes to theaters, ever. So if you're gonna hate on the Amazing Digital Circus for having an early release in theaters, then you also have to hate on literally every single movie ever made that's been put in theaters for doing the exact same thing. But some people said, but why didn't they release it in more theaters, in more countries? Well, Glitch told you to call your local theater to get the movie showing near you. But some people said, but that just sounds like Glitch is telling us to fix the problem ourselves. Well, Glitch is not a big company with thousands of employees like Disney is. You can't expect a small indie YouTube channel to have the same massive theater release as giant companies like Universal or DreamWorks has. Putting that big expectation for a big company on a literal YouTube channel is not right or realistic at all. They do not have the time or resources to go to literally every theater in the world to get the movie showing. You can't expect that from a small indie company. So it is 100% right for a small YouTube channel to ask the audience to bring the theater to their own town, because many hands make light work. And they also made an announcement on how they were trying to get the last act in many theaters as they can get. And the Glitch team also said that one of the main reasons why they wanted to do this theater release was to help indie animation as a whole. Because if it became a success, it could change how the entire movie industry views indie animation as a whole, and open up more opportunities for more indie animation to make its way into the big screen and gain the recognition it deserves. And it was a massive success. The last act made more money than the new Star Wars movie. That's right, this indie animation beat Disney. But people say, but there'll be spoilers online, how will I avoid them? Once again, that is the very same thing for every single movie that's ever come out to theaters. There are always spoilers online for every movie that's ever come out. And after episode 9 was leaked online a few weeks early, there were spoilers. But I didn't get spoiled at all. It was actually very easy for me not to get spoiled for the finale. If you don't go looking for spoilers, you likely won't find them. And guess what? Other movies that came out to theaters got spoiled online early as well. Like No Way Home, which leaked scenes with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire before the movie came out. But just because movies can sometimes get spoiled early online, doesn't mean that bringing them into theaters is a bad idea or a bad move, or a reason for you to justify hate on the show or series. That's completely unfair and wrong. Because if you're going to hate on Digital Circus for this, then you also have to hate on literally every movie that ever came out to theaters as well for doing the exact same thing. People said, but we will have to avoid spoilers for 2 weeks! Well, are you seriously telling me that you can't live without the Amazing Digital Circus for 2 weeks? Are you telling me you can't live without it for 2 weeks? Are you that obsessed with it? You might get upset that you have to avoid spoilers, but once again, that is literally the same thing for every single movie that has ever come out to theaters, ever. There are always spoilers online for every single movie. Not everyone goes to theaters to see a movie. Not everyone goes to the movie on opening weekend. I didn't see the Minecraft movie until a week after it was already out. And when it came out, I had to avoid spoilers online and to avoid social media and Twitter to not get spoiled. Avoiding social media for spoilers is a very normal and common thing for movies. It is done for literally every movie, and no one ever complains about it because it is expected for every movie that comes out. So it's okay for other movies to do it, but when Digital Circus does it, then you have to hate on it? Like, what the actual heck? That's 100% wrong. People are so obsessed with the show that if they can't have their fun, then they have to make everyone else not have fun either. They essentially say, if I can't watch this movie in theaters, then no one else can. Like, how incredibly selfish and self-centered is that? People online seem to take this show way too seriously. They take it so seriously. You can become a fan of the show, but once you start taking it too seriously and become obsessed with it, to the point where you get mad at the show for not doing what you want it to do, or treat avoiding spoilers like it's the end of your life, or when you start setting literal death threats over a TV show, then it can become toxic and cloud your judgment. And Gooseworks has even distanced himself from the fandom after it became more toxic online, which is really sad, but I honestly don't blame him at all, seeing how terrible fans have been recently. People take the show way too seriously, but as God Rocks once said,
"It was just a TV show. It was just a TV show."
It's just a TV show. There's no reason to take it too seriously. People also take Make Your Mark too seriously as well. They overanalyze everything and hate on the show for not doing what they wanted to do. But Make Your Mark wasn't made to be overanalyzed. G5 and Digital Circus wasn't made to fulfill your expectations, but to tell a story. And the story they both tell is good. If only you gave it a chance, instead of clinging to your own expectations, then you would see how good the story really is. But anyways, that's everything I want to say for this video, so thank you for watching. I am Ultrasonic Rainboom, and I'll see you all next time.